Okay, folks, so when I say asphalt, you say green, all right? So asphalt, green, asphalt, green, asphalt, green. How's it going, folks? This is Pat from Asphalt Green's Recess Enhancement Program here with another instructional video, this time for our game Switch, Change, Rotate. Before we get into the game though, as always, we want to start off with our safety check. So always before we play and after we play as well, making sure that we and our students are washing our hands for 20 seconds, making sure that our hands are staying away from our face at all times. We also want to make sure that if anybody is coughing or sneezing, they're just dabbing right into the elbow. You can even go left if you want, whichever way you feel comfortable. And we always want to make sure that we are keeping 6 feet away from one another so that we are properly social distanced. So once our safety check is done and we're all good to go, how about you give me 2 thumbs up and let's get started. Everyone seems ready to go, so let's hop right into Switch, Change, Rotate. And wait, what's the name of the game? Rotate, change, no, Switch, Change, Rotate, right? And as the name suggests, we're gonna be doing a lot of switching, changing, and rotating throughout this game. It's a great game for the older elementary age students, so students who are in grades 3 through 5 or within that similar age range. It's lots and lots of fun, as all our rep games are, but equally as important as fun, if not more important, is safety, and this game is super safe. During it, we'll be able to keep the appropriate distance of 6 feet away from one another, and there won't be any equipment needed, so students won't have to touch any equipment whatsoever. The only equipment you might need might be cones or tape that you lay down to designate boundaries, okay? But let's get into the details of it, and as always, with all of our games, we want to rep it out, so we'll hop right into the rep model and start with R, as we always do, ready. So, how do we get ready for Switch, Change, Rotate? Well, as always, we want to make sure that we are mapping out our play area, right? So whatever space that you might have available, you want to take a look at it, and you want to designate the boundaries of that play area. You can lay down cones, you can lay down tape, whatever it might be. For Switch, Change, Rotate, there are going to be 3 students in lines, and there'll be those groupings of 3 throughout. So you might want to think of how you can space that out, having 3 students lined up, staying 6 feet apart next to another group of 3 students standing 6 feet apart. So just keep that in mind when you're mapping out your play area and setting up your boundaries. So once you've mapped out the play area, you've designated the boundaries, laid the cones down, what have you, you can then go about removing any items that might pose a safety risk or thinking about how you can work around any items that can't be moved. Then, of course, if you haven't already, you can lay down the equipment, designating the boundaries. As I said, you won't need any other equipment during the game, so you don't have to worry about that. And then once you've finished off all those other steps, you of course can gather up all of the students, and you can use the attention grabber that I used at the beginning of this video, which is when I say asphalt, you say green. Asphalt, green. Asphalt, green. All right, everyone gather up, standing 6 feet apart, and let's get started with Switch, Change, Rotate. So once you have students gathered up, that means that you're ready to hop into the E portion of the rep model, and you're ready to explain the rules to Switch, Change, Rotate, okay? So, as always, when explaining games to students, you want to make sure that you're using a loud and clear voice so all students can hear and understand you. And throughout your explanation, you also want to be asking students specific questions about the rules. Some suggestions that we have for you are, what do you do when you hear switch? What do you do when you hear change? What do you do when you hear rotate? And that'll make a little bit more sense as I go through the rules of the game. And you can follow along on your PDF copy of the game instructions, or you can find the instructions on our website, okay? So let's hop into explaining Switch, Change, Rotate. So how do we play? Well, the first thing that we want to do is to break off into groups of 3, okay? So what you can do is you can ask students to break off into groups of 3, find 2 partners, and you can give them a countdown, find 2 more partners in 5, 4, 3, or you can form the groups yourself, okay? And you can point to them and say, 1, 2, 3, you're group 1, 1, 2, 3, you're group 2, so on and so forth, whichever you feel most comfortable with. Once they've broken off into groups of 3, and again, making sure that they're standing 6 feet apart, you can ask them to line up and face you. So you should have a series of groups of 3 students facing you, everyone standing 6 feet apart from one another, okay? And you will be the leader, and you can explain that you will be giving certain commands that these groups will need to listen for and will need to follow as a group, okay? And those commands are, you guessed it, switch, change, and rotate, okay? So if students hear switch, what that means is that the first person in the line and the last person in the line need to swap places, okay? If students hear change, what that means is that every person in that line will need to change direction. So at the beginning of the game, everyone will be facing you, and if you say change, everyone will turn and face away from you, all right? And if students hear rotate, what that means is that the first person in the line, right, will have to run to the back or move to the back, and then the person in the middle will step up and then become the new front of the line, okay? So we'll just go over those again. So switch, the first and the last person change places. Change, everyone changes direction, right? Just does a 180 turn in place. And rotate, where the first person in the line goes to the back and the person in the middle moves up, okay? And so you as the leader will be giving these commands, and you'll be going at any pace that you want with them. And so if you catch any students making a mistake at any point, well, that group will do 3 twizzles or any form of exercise you want, jumping jacks, whatever, but we're gonna go with twizzles here, which means that they're going to jump up and do a 360 turn and land down on the ground, okay? So those are the instructions for how to play switch, change, rotate. So how about we move away from the E portion of the rep model now and move into the P portion of the rep model. Talk a little bit about how we can play the game so that students are abiding by the rules of the game, and how we can play it to keep students interested in the game throughout our playtime, okay? So first tip that we have for you is practice. Practice before the game even gets started, right? So we can have the students practice getting into groups of 3, and then we can have students practice the motions associated with each of the commands, but just in slow motion, right? So maybe you can do it so that they're like, okay, we're gonna switch, change, and rotate like we're walking on the moon, okay? Which, just pretend like you're Neil Armstrong on the moon, just moving nice and slowly. In that way, students can get comfortable with the motions associated with each of the commands, and so that they'll understand the rules and the commands a little bit better when things get a little bit faster, okay? And that way too, you can also see where there might be some difficulty keeping the appropriate social distance, and you can think about ways to work around that, right? Maybe the person at the front will always turn to their left to get to the back of the line whenever they hear switch, and maybe the person at the back will always run to their right and come to the front of the line when they hear switch, right? So you can just think through a few things like that. Additionally, so once you've gone through all of those instructions and you've practiced and everything, it's important that whoever the command giver is making sure that everyone is abiding by those commands and motions throughout the rest of the game, right? And you also want the command giver to be moving fairly quickly with their commands, right? Because if you just heard switch, change, like I'm getting bored even just saying that. So you can imagine what students might feel if they were playing the game. So you want to make sure whoever the command giver is moving fairly quickly with their commands so as to keep students engaged and moving at all times. It'll keep it more fun, okay? And with that, as I was saying, whoever the command giver is, right? Because maybe it starts off with you, but then maybe you can turn it over to a student and have them practice their leadership skills, right? So maybe there's a student that really, really wants to try it, or maybe there's a student who isn't engaged in the game at all, and this is their way of getting involved in the game, and then maybe they might even become somebody who's in one of those groups of 3, which means that they'll be getting super, super active and having lots of fun. And so that's what we always want, right? And with that in mind, as always, it's great to mix up the movements. So maybe at the start, you start with everyone switching, changing, and rotating while walking. Maybe you turn it into a jog, but you can change the movements up however you'd like. So you can turn it to running. You can turn it to skipping. You can turn it to hopping. You can turn it, again, to my personal favorite, walking on the moon, right? However you feel that students can be moving and however you want to get them active. The important thing, again, is that they're enjoying themselves and that they're moving and getting active, right? So those are our tips for switch, change, rotate, which means that we are at the end of our instructional video. So let's gather up for the final time. So when I say asphalt, you say green, asphalt, green, asphalt, green, asphalt, green. And I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch another instructional video. I hope you found it useful, and I hope you find it fun when you play it with your students. And I hope that you stay tuned for more instructional videos from us here at Asphalt Green. All right?